A young man convinces himself that he is exceptional, that ordinary morality, the rules that bind ordinary people, does not apply to someone with a great enough mind and a great enough purpose. He builds an airtight intellectual case for why a single terrible act, weighed against all the good he could do afterward, is not only permissible but almost noble, and then he does it. And from the moment it is done, the thing he was most sure of, his own mind, becomes the instrument of his destruction. This is the engine of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, written in 1866, and it is not really a crime story at all. It is the most precise map ever drawn of what guilt does to a person who thought he was too smart to feel it. Here is the strange part. We remember this book as a book about a murder, but the murder happens early, and it is almost the least interesting thing in the novel. What Dostoevsky is actually obsessed with is the aftermath, the long, feverish, sleepless unraveling of a man who got away with it and discovers that getting away with it was never the hard part. The hard part is living inside your own head afterward. Dostoevsky understood something we are still trying to relearn in 2026. You can fool the police, the public, the algorithm, and your own friends, but you cannot fool the one witness who never leaves the room, yourself. Let me reframe the whole book. Raskolnikov, the protagonist, does not get caught because of clever detective work. He is not undone by evidence. He is undone by the simple fact that a human conscience is not an opinion you can argue away. It is closer to a physiological system, like hunger or fear, and it does not care how brilliant your justification is. Raskolnikov has an answer for every moral objection. His logic is genuinely hard to refute on its own terms, and it does not save him for a single hour, because guilt was never going to be defeated by a better argument. The body keeps the score the mind refuses to settle. To understand why, you have to understand his theory, because it is seductive and it is everywhere today. Raskolnikov, the protagonist, divides humanity into two groups, the ordinary, who must obey the rules, and the extraordinary, who have the right to transgress them in pursuit of something greater. He places himself, tentatively, hopefully, in the second group. The crime is partly a test, a way to prove to himself that he is one of the special ones who can step over the line and feel nothing. Notice how modern this is. We are surrounded by a quieter version of the same theory, the belief that the talented, the visionary, the genius, the disruptor operates beyond the petty rules that constrain regular people. Dostoevsky is testing that belief to destruction, and the result is brutal. The line you think you're special enough to cross turns out to be drawn inside you, not outside, and crossing it cuts you. Watch what guilt actually does to Raskolnikov, because Dostoevsky renders it with terrifying accuracy. It does not arrive as a clear voice saying, "You did wrong." It arrives as fever, as paranoia, as an inability to be near other people, as a compulsion to return to the scene, as a self-sabotaging urge to almost confess, again and again, to flirt with discovery. Modern psychology has a word for the state he is describing. It is the agony of a mind that has done something it cannot reconcile with its own self-image, and the resulting dissonance is so unbearable that the person will do almost anything, including engineer their own punishment, just to make the internal noise stop. Raskolnikov is not running from justice. Some deep part of him is running toward it, because punishment is the only thing that promises to quiet the witness inside. Have you ever felt a smaller version of this? The thing you did that no one knows about, that you got away with cleanly, that should by all logic be over, and yet it visits you at 3 in the morning years later.
The conscience does not check whether you were caught. It does not grant a statute of limitations for being clever. This is the deeply uncomfortable gift of the book. It tells you that the fantasy of the perfect secret, the wrong with no consequences, is a fantasy, because the consequence was always going to be internal, and the internal court never adjourns. There is a saying in Uzbek culture that a thief is not afraid of the judge so much as of his own shadow. It captures Dostoevsky's whole thesis in a sentence. External punishment is something you can sometimes dodge. The shadow that follows you, the self that watched you do it, is inescapable, because it goes everywhere you go. You can leave the country, you cannot leave the witness. But here's where Dostoevsky does something most moralists never do. He does not stop at condemnation. The path out when it finally comes for Raskolnikov is not cleverer reasoning or successful escape. It is confession and the human connection that confession makes possible. The turning point of the entire novel is his relationship with Sonia, a woman whose suffering is total and whose compassion is even greater, and who does not argue him out of his theory. She simply refuses to abandon him and quietly insists that the way back to being human runs through owning what he did, out loud, to another person.
The intellect that got him into the cell of his own making cannot get him out. Only honesty and connection can. The mind built the prison. The heart holds the key. Notice the structure of that, because it is the opposite of how we usually think guilt resolves. We imagine relief comes from being absolved, from someone telling us it was fine, it was understandable, we should not be so hard on ourselves. Dostoevsky says no. Relief comes from the harder thing, from facing it squarely and being met in that facing by another human being who does not flinch away. The cure for the unbearable secret is not minimizing it. It is bringing it into the light, in the presence of someone who can hold it with you. The shame thrives in concealment and dies in honest contact. Now bring this into 2026, because it has never been more relevant. We live in an age engineered for moral self-justification at scale. Whatever we want to do, there is a community online ready to assure us it was fine, a framework ready to reclassify our worst impulses as strength, an endless supply of arguments to put us in the extraordinary category that does not have to follow the ordinary rules. We have more tools than any humans in history for arguing ourselves out of guilt, and Dostoevsky is standing at the end of that whole project, telling us it does not work. You can win every argument and still lose every night. The conscience does not read the comments. It is not persuaded by the consensus. It simply keeps its record and waits. I want to be careful here, because guilt is heavy, and this story walks close to despair. So let me say plainly, the point of the book is not that wrongdoing makes a person irredeemable. It is the opposite. Raskolnikov's entire arc is proof that even the gravest fall is not the end, that the road back exists and runs through honesty, humility, and human connection, rather than through self-punishment. If you are carrying something that visits you at 3 in the morning, the lesson is not that you are condemned. It is that secrets lose their power when they are no longer secret, and that being met in your worst truth by even one trustworthy person is the beginning of being free. That is a hopeful book wearing a heavy coat. Read Crime and Punishment again, not as a thriller about whether a murderer gets caught, but as the most honest book ever written about the relationship between the mind and the conscience. It gives you language for the thing you cannot reason your way out of, for the witness who follows you, for the strange truth that punishment escaped is not peace earned.
And it offers the one exit that actually works, which is not a better argument, but a braver honesty. The mind is a magnificent lawyer. It will defend anything you ask it to. Dostoevsky's warning across 160 years is that the verdict was never up to the lawyer. It was always up to the witness who saw everything, and who is, inescapably, you. There is a further insight buried in the structure of the novel that is easy to miss, and it concerns the difference between guilt and shame. Raskolnikov is not merely sorry for an act, he is in crisis over what the act says about who he is, because the whole point of his theory was to prove his own extraordinary nature, and the suffering exposes him as ordinary after all, bound by the same conscience as everyone else. This is why the intellectual defense fails so completely. He is not defending a deed, he is defending an identity, and no argument can hold an identity together once the person's own actions have contradicted it. The way out, when it finally comes, requires him to surrender the very self-image the crime was meant to prove, to accept that he is not above other people, but among them, fallible, in need of mercy like anyone else. The release is not in being declared innocent, it is in laying down the exhausting project of being exceptional and rejoining the ordinary human race he had tried to rise above. Dostoevsky's deepest suggestion is that much of our private torment is the cost of defending a version of ourselves that reality keeps refusing to confirm. Tell me in the comments, do you think a person can truly outrun their own conscience, or does it always find them? If you want more deep dives that turn the stories you think you know inside out, subscribe and check the description for further reading. And one honest note before you go. This video uses AI-generated audio and visuals, and it offers reflection, not professional or moral advice. If something in this story sits heavily on you, the book's own lesson holds, which is that it helps to say it out loud to a person you trust, rather than carry it alone. This was just one reader's thoughts, offered to make you think.